What if I told you that your entire life could begin to change in just 7 days? Not 7 years, not some distant future when everything is finally perfect. 7 days. Because the truth nobody tells you is this: your reality is not controlled by luck, background, or circumstances. It is controlled by what you repeatedly think, believe, and do. Most people spend years waiting for their life to change, but the ones who win, they decide to change themselves first. And when you change the way you think, the way you move, and the way you show up in the world, reality has no choice but to follow. So today, I'm going to show you 7 powerful shifts, one for each day, that can begin rewriting your reality starting now. The first step toward rewriting your reality begins with something that many people spend their entire lives avoiding: the truth. Not the comfortable version of the truth, not the story we tell others to make things sound better, but the raw, honest reality of where we currently stand in life. Most people keep moving through their days on autopilot, distracting themselves with work, entertainment, and endless noise, so they never have to sit down quietly and confront their situation. Yet the moment you decide to change your life, the very first thing you must do is pause and look directly at it. You must examine where you are emotionally, financially, mentally, and spiritually. This is not about judging yourself or feeling ashamed. It is about seeing clearly, because if you cannot see your current position with honesty, you will never be able to chart a new direction. Facing the truth requires courage because it strips away excuses. It removes the comfortable illusion that someday things will magically improve on their own. Many people blame circumstances, their background, their environment, or other people for the direction their life has taken. While challenges and unfair situations absolutely exist, remaining trapped in blame gives away the one thing that can actually change your future: your responsibility. When you decide to face the truth, you reclaim that responsibility. You acknowledge that while you may not control everything that has happened to you, you still control what happens next. This realization can feel heavy at first, but it is also incredibly empowering. Because the moment you stop blaming the world, you start gaining the power to reshape your place within it. Honesty also forces you to recognize the habits and patterns that have quietly shaped your current reality. Our lives are rarely the result of one dramatic decision. Instead, they are built from hundreds of small daily choices that slowly compound over time. The hours spent procrastinating instead of learning something new, the comfort of staying in familiar routines rather than challenging ourselves, the moments when we told ourselves, "I'll start tomorrow." These patterns accumulate until one day we wake up and wonder how we ended up so far from the life we imagined. Day one is about tracing those patterns back to their roots. It is about identifying the behaviors that have been holding you back, not to criticize yourself, but to finally understand what must change moving forward. When you truly face the truth about your life, something interesting happens. Clarity begins to replace confusion. Suddenly the fog lifts. Instead of vague frustration or a general sense that things could be better, you begin to see specific areas that need improvement. Maybe you realize your mindset has been filled with self-doubt. Maybe you see that fear has been preventing you from pursuing opportunities. Or perhaps you recognize that you've been surrounding yourself with influences that drain your energy instead of strengthening your ambition. This level of clarity is powerful because it transforms problems from overwhelming mysteries into solvable challenges. Once you can name what is holding you back, you can begin to dismantle it piece by piece. Another important part of facing the truth is accepting that growth requires discomfort. Many people want a better life, but they want it without the emotional friction that comes with self-examination. They want success without questioning their habits, progress without confronting their fears, and transformation without letting go of the behaviors that keep them stuck. But real change begins when you become willing to sit with that discomfort instead of running from it. The honesty of day one might reveal mistakes, wasted time, or missed opportunities. That realization may sting, yet that sting is not a sign of failure. It is a signal that you are finally becoming aware. Awareness is the doorway through which every meaningful transformation must pass. By the end of this first day, the goal is not to have everything figured out. The goal is simply to become conscious. Conscious of your choices, your habits, your thinking patterns, and the direction those things are taking you. Too many people move through life unconsciously, repeating the same routines year after year while expecting different results. But the moment you shine the light of awareness on your life, you break that cycle. You stop drifting and start directing. You move from being a passive participant in your story to becoming the person who is actively writing it. That shift may feel subtle at first, but it marks the true beginning of rewriting your reality. On the second day of rewriting your reality, the focus shifts inward to one of the most powerful forces shaping your life, the story you tell yourself. Every person carries an internal narrative, a quiet voice that interprets experiences and assigns meaning to them. This voice speaks when things go wrong, when opportunities appear, when challenges arise. For many people, that inner story is filled with doubt, limitation, and fear. It whispers that success belongs to someone else, that greatness requires talents they don't possess, or that their past mistakes define their future. Over time, this narrative becomes so familiar that it feels like truth. But the reality is that this inner story is not a fixed law of nature. It is a script that has been learned, repeated, and reinforced through years of thinking the same thoughts. Much of this internal story forms long before we are even aware of it. It grows out of childhood experiences, societal expectations, failures, criticism, and moments when we were told what we could or could not become. A single negative label repeated enough times can begin to feel permanent. Someone might hear, "You're not good enough," or "People like you don't succeed." And without realizing it, they begin carrying that belief into every area of life. The mind starts filtering experiences through that belief, reinforcing it again and again. Opportunities are ignored because the person assumes they will fail. Challenges are avoided because the outcome already seems decided. In this way, the story becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, quietly shaping decisions and behaviors until it turns into the reality the person expected. Day two is about recognizing that the story in your mind has been writing the script of your life, often without your permission. The moment you become aware of it, you gain the power to question it. Instead of accepting every limiting thought as truth, you begin to examine it. You ask yourself where that belief came from and whether it truly reflects who you are capable of becoming. Many of the limitations people believe about themselves are simply echoes of old experiences that no longer define their present or their future. When you challenge those thoughts, you start breaking the automatic patterns that have been guiding your actions for years. Changing your internal story does not mean pretending that obstacles do not exist or that life will always be easy. Instead, it means rewriting the meaning you assign to those obstacles. Where the old story might say, "This challenge proves I'm not capable," the new story begins to say, "This challenge is part of my growth." Where the old narrative says, "I always fail," the new perspective becomes, "Every attempt teaches me something valuable." These subtle shifts in interpretation may appear small, but they dramatically influence how you respond to the world. When you begin seeing setbacks as lessons rather than final judgments, fear loses much of its power. Language also plays an important role in shaping the story you live by. The words you use when speaking about yourself reinforce your internal beliefs. Phrases like, "I can't," "I'm terrible at this," or "I'll never succeed" act like instructions to your mind, guiding your behavior toward confirming those statements. On day 2, you begin replacing that language with something more empowering. Instead of declaring defeat, you acknowledge progress. Instead of labeling yourself by your weaknesses, you focus on your potential for growth. This does not require unrealistic optimism. It simply requires choosing words that open possibilities rather than closing them. As the day continues, you may begin noticing how frequently your mind attempts to return to its familiar script. Old patterns of thinking do not disappear instantly because they have been practiced for years. But each time you catch a limiting thought and replace it with a more constructive one, you weaken the grip of the old narrative. Gradually, a new story begins to form. One that sees challenges as opportunities, effort as progress, and growth as an ongoing process. This new story becomes the foundation for the reality you are building. By changing the narrative in your mind, you begin shaping the decisions, actions, and habits that will ultimately transform the direction of your life. By the 3rd day of rewriting your reality, you begin to understand a powerful truth that many people overlook. Your environment quietly shapes the person you become. Every day you are surrounded by influences. People, conversations, media, routines, and spaces that continuously send messages to your mind. These influences affect how you think, what you believe is possible, and how much effort you are willing to give toward your goals. Most people assume that success or failure comes purely from willpower, but the reality is that your surroundings often play a much larger role than you realize. If you constantly place yourself in environments that encourage distraction, negativity, or complacency, even the strongest motivation will eventually begin to fade. Think about how easily moods and attitudes spread within a group. Spend enough time around people who complain about everything, doubt every opportunity, and criticize anyone who tries to grow, and slowly that mindset begins to influence your own thinking. It may happen so gradually that you do not notice it at first. Your ambitions may start feeling unrealistic, your goals may seem less important, and your confidence may weaken. On the other hand, when you spend time with people who challenge themselves, pursue growth, and believe improvement is always possible, something very different begins to happen. Their energy pushes you to raise your standards. Their mindset reminds you that progress is achievable. In this way, the environment you choose becomes a silent architect of your mindset. Day 3 is about becoming intentional with that environment. Instead of passively accepting whatever influences surround you, you begin shaping them with purpose. This might mean evaluating the conversations you participate in, the content you consume online, or the spaces where you spend most of your time. Ask yourself whether those influences move you closer to the life you want or quietly pull you away from it. Many people spend hours absorbing negativity through social media, television, or constant exposure to pessimistic voices. Over time, that stream of negativity programs the mind to expect failure or fear change. Rewriting your reality requires interrupting that cycle and replacing those influences with ones that inspire learning, creativity, and determination. Controlling your environment does not always mean cutting people out of your life or dramatically changing everything overnight. Sometimes it simply means adjusting how much influence certain voices have over your thinking. You might begin spending more time reading ideas that challenge you, listening to conversations that spark ambition, or surrounding yourself with individuals who value discipline and progress. Even small changes, like creating a workspace free from distractions or setting aside time each day for focused learning, can shift the atmosphere around you. These adjustments may seem minor at first, but they gradually build an environment where growth becomes the natural direction rather than the constant struggle. Another important part of shaping your environment is recognizing how physical spaces affect your mental state. The places where you work, rest, and think send subtle signals to your brain. A cluttered, chaotic space can encourage procrastination and mental fatigue, while a clean and organized environment often supports clarity and productivity. When you design spaces that reflect focus and purpose, you make it easier for your mind to enter a state of concentration. This does not require perfection or expensive changes. Even simple actions like organizing your desk, reducing distractions, or dedicating a quiet corner to learning can transform how effectively you use your time and energy. As day 3 comes to an end, the goal is not to create a perfect environment, but to become aware of how deeply it influences your behavior and mindset. Once you recognize this connection, you begin making conscious decisions about what you allow into your mental space. Instead of letting the world shape your thinking by default, you start choosing influences that strengthen your discipline, expand your vision, and support your long-term goals. Over time, this carefully shaped environment begins reinforcing the new habits and beliefs you are building. And as those habits grow stronger, the reality you are rewriting starts becoming more visible in your daily life. By the 4th day of rewriting your reality, a crucial realization begins to emerge. Waiting for the perfect moment is one of the biggest reasons people remain stuck. Many individuals spend years preparing, planning, and imagining what they want their life to look like, but they never actually begin. They convince themselves that they need more knowledge, more confidence, more time, or the perfect circumstances before they can take the first step. This mindset feels safe because it delays the possibility of failure. However, it also delays the possibility of progress. The truth is that readiness is often an illusion. If you wait until you feel completely prepared, you may end up waiting forever. Most of the opportunities that transform lives appear before a person feels confident enough to seize them. The entrepreneur starts a business without knowing every answer. The student pursues a difficult skill while still doubting their abilities. The individual chasing a dream steps forward despite fear whispering that they might not succeed. What separates these individuals from everyone else is not that they lack fear. It is that they refuse to let fear control their timing. They understand that clarity often appears after action begins, not before it. The first step does not require perfection. It simply requires courage. Day 4 focuses on breaking the habit of hesitation. When you decide to act before you feel ready, you send a powerful message to your mind. Progress matters more than comfort. Each action, even a small one, starts creating momentum. Momentum is important because it changes how challenges feel. When you are standing still, obstacles look enormous and intimidating. But once you begin moving, those same obstacles often shrink into manageable tasks. The act of starting transforms uncertainty into learning, and learning gradually replaces fear with confidence. Another reason action is so powerful is that it teaches lessons no amount of planning can provide. You can read books, watch tutorials, and think about possibilities for years, but real understanding often arrives only when you try something yourself. Mistakes become teachers. Unexpected problems reveal skills you need to develop. Small successes show you that progress is possible. Through action, the unknown slowly becomes familiar. This process builds practical experience, which is far more valuable than theoretical preparation alone. Every attempt, even if imperfect, moves you closer to mastery. Taking action before you feel ready also reshapes your relationship with fear. Fear thrives in imagination. When we picture worst-case scenarios over and over again, the mind exaggerates them until they seem overwhelming. But when you take a step forward, reality rarely matches those exaggerated fears. You discover that challenges are often smaller than they appeared in your thoughts. Even when difficulties arise, you realize that you are capable of adapting and solving problems as they come. This discovery strengthens your confidence because it proves that fear does not have to dictate your choices. By the end of day 4, you begin to understand that action is the bridge between intention and transformation. Dreams remain abstract until they are connected to movement. Ideas remain potential until they are tested in the real world. When you stop waiting for readiness and start embracing action, progress accelerates. Each step reveals new possibilities, each experience teaches valuable lessons, and each challenge strengthens your resilience. Through consistent action, the future you once imagined slowly begins to take shape, not because the path was perfectly clear from the beginning, but because you chose to move forward despite the uncertainty. By the 5th day of rewriting your reality, you begin to recognize one of the biggest misconceptions about success: the belief that motivation is what drives long-term achievement. Motivation feels powerful in the moment. It sparks excitement, fills you with energy, and makes you believe that change will be easy. After hearing an inspiring message or imagining a better future, you may feel ready to conquer the world. But motivation is like a sudden burst of wind. It arrives quickly, lifts you up for a short time, and then fades just as fast. If your progress depends only on motivation, your effort will rise and fall with your emotions. And when motivation disappears, many people quietly return to their old habits. This is why discipline becomes the real foundation of transformation. Discipline is not about excitement or emotional intensity. It is about commitment. It is the ability to continue showing up even on the days when enthusiasm is nowhere to be found. Discipline is what keeps a person moving forward when progress feels slow, when distractions appear, and when comfort tries to pull them back into familiar routines. While motivation may start the journey, discipline is what ensures that the journey continues. It turns occasional effort into consistent action, and consistency is the force that ultimately creates lasting change. Developing discipline often begins with small decisions repeated daily. Instead of waiting for the perfect moment to work on your goals, you create a routine that makes progress automatic. This might involve waking up earlier to dedicate time to learning a new skill, setting aside focused hours for important work, or committing to habits that strengthen your mind and body. At first, these actions may feel uncomfortable because they require you to break patterns that have existed for years. But over time, repetition transforms those actions into habits, and habits gradually shape your identity. The things that once required effort begin to feel natural. One important aspect of discipline is learning to separate your actions from your emotions. Many people allow their feelings to determine whether they work toward their goals on a given day. If they feel inspired, they work hard. If they feel tired, discouraged, or distracted, they pause their efforts. Discipline changes that pattern by placing commitment above emotion. It teaches you that progress does not depend on how you feel in the moment, but on the standards you have chosen to live by. When you follow through on your commitments, regardless of temporary moods, you build a powerful sense of self-trust. Another benefit of discipline is the sense of control it creates in your life. When your habits become structured and intentional, you begin directing your time and energy instead of letting distractions control them. The hours that once slipped away unnoticed start contributing to meaningful progress. You become more aware of how your daily choices shape your long-term future. This awareness strengthens your focus because you realize that every small action, every hour spent practicing, learning, or improving adds another brick to the foundation of the life you are building. By the end of day 5, you begin to see discipline not as a restriction, but as a form of freedom. While it may require effort in the beginning, it eventually removes the constant struggle of deciding whether or not to take action. Your routines guide you forward automatically. The work gets done because it has become part of who you are. Over time, this steady commitment compounds into remarkable progress. What once seemed like distant goals begin moving closer, not because of occasional bursts of inspiration, but because discipline ensured that you kept showing up day after day. By the 6th day of rewriting your reality, you begin to realize something deeper than habits, actions, or motivation. True transformation is not only about changing what you do, it is about changing who you become. Many people spend years chasing results without understanding that results are simply the reflection of identity. If someone still sees themselves as the same person they were yesterday, same doubts, same limitations, same beliefs, then their behavior will eventually return to familiar patterns. That is why temporary motivation often fades. The person may attempt new actions for a short time, but if their identity remains unchanged, the old habits slowly return. Day 6 is about shifting that identity so that your new behaviors feel natural instead of forced. Identity is powerful because it quietly guides every decision you make. When someone believes they are a disciplined person, they act with discipline without constantly debating whether they should. When someone believes they are capable of growth, they approach challenges with curiosity instead of fear. But when someone identifies themselves as unlucky, incapable, or destined to fail, their actions unconsciously begin to support that belief. They hesitate when opportunities appear, avoid risks that might lead to growth, and settle for less than they deserve. In this way, identity becomes the lens through which every possibility is interpreted. Changing that lens changes everything that follows. Becoming someone new does not mean pretending to be a completely different person overnight. Instead, it begins with small but meaningful shifts in how you see yourself. Rather than saying, "I'm trying to be successful," you begin thinking, "I am someone who works towards success every day." Instead of viewing discipline as something difficult, you begin recognizing yourself as a person who honors commitments. These subtle shifts may sound simple, but they gradually reshape your mindset. The more you act in alignment with the identity you are building, the stronger that identity becomes. One of the most effective ways to build a new identity is through consistent evidence. Every time you complete a task you promised yourself, you reinforce the belief that you are reliable. Every time you practice a skill instead of avoiding it, you strengthen the belief that you are capable of improvement. These small moments accumulate into proof that the new version of yourself is real. Over time, this proof becomes stronger than the doubts that once held you back. Instead of wondering whether you can succeed, you begin trusting the process because you have seen yourself grow through effort. Another important part of becoming someone new is letting go of the labels that once defined you. Many people carry outdated identities that no longer serve them. Labels shaped by past failures, criticism from others, or moments when things did not go as planned. These labels can quietly limit progress because they keep a person anchored to an old version of themselves. Day 6 invites you to release those limitations and recognize that identity is not fixed. Human beings are constantly evolving. The person you were yesterday does not have to determine who you are tomorrow. As the 6th day unfolds, the shift becomes clear. Rewriting your reality is no longer just about achieving goals. It is about embodying the qualities of the person capable of creating those goals. Discipline, courage, persistence, and self-belief begin to feel like natural parts of your character rather than temporary efforts. When this shift happens, progress accelerates because your actions are no longer forced. They are aligned with who you believe you are. And when your identity aligns with growth, the life you are building begins to reflect that transformation in ways that feel both powerful and lasting. Now think about what just happened over these 7 days. You didn't magically change the world around you, but you did something far more powerful. You changed the person facing the world. You faced the truth about where you stand. You rewrote the story inside your mind. You protected your environment from voices that shrink your vision. You took action before confidence showed up. You chose discipline when motivation disappeared. And most importantly, you began becoming someone new. And here is the secret nobody talks about. Reality doesn't respond to wishes. Reality responds to who you become. The world starts opening doors for the person who thinks differently, moves differently, and refuses to live like yesterday's version of themselves. 7 days may not completely transform your life yet, but 7 days can do something even more important. They can break the pattern that kept you stuck. They can show you that change isn't some distant miracle reserved for other people. It's a decision repeated daily. So the real question is not whether your reality can change. The real question is this: when the next 7 days begin, will you go back to the person you used to be, or will you keep becoming the person your future is waiting for?